Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for April 10th, 2018. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and television news. This is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson, and joining me today on the show are Slash Film weekend editor Brad Oman
Hey, that's me.
and writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey everyone.
Thanks for joining me, guys. Let's go ahead and cannonball. I always say let's dive into the news. Let's cannonball into the news today. Let's start with HT. A Quiet Place writers apparently already have some ideas in place for a sequel. This movie's doing pretty well at the box office. Tell us what they said about a potential sequel.
Yeah, whenever there is a horror hit, it often spawns at least three sequels, maybe a video game or a theme park ride, who knows along the lines. And A Quiet Place is doing really well at the box office. It scored the second best opening ever for an original horror movie, and it has turned John Krasinski, an actor turned director, into a new rising directorial star. So, screenwriters for A Quiet Place, Brian Woods and Scott Beck, revealed that they already have a handful of A Quiet Place sequel ideas in place. So at a press conference for the movie, Woods and Beck said that they would be open to the idea of writing a sequel to the critically acclaimed horror movie. Woods told Fandango, "It's such a fun world. There's so many things that you could do." And then they revealed that they have just many discarded set pieces and other ideas hiding out on Word documents on their computer. And at the end of the day, who are these characters and what does this situation mean to that dynamic? So essentially, they'd be open to also doing more about this family that's led by John Krasinski and Emily Blunt in the movie that we've seen, or doing something that's similar to the approach of the Purge series, in that we follow characters who are entirely different from the ones that we first meet, battling the same creatures in the same post-apocalyptic sort of wasteland. So that would be a really interesting approach as well.
Yeah, it's encouraging to me that they specifically say at the end of the day who are the characters in the story and what does that situation mean to the dynamic, because that means that they're not planning on just throwing in those discarded set pieces just, in order to sort of cross it off a list and get it in there. It seems like they're really, if they are going to come back for this movie, which we should say is not greenlit yet, a sequel to A Quiet Place has not been officially greenlit yet, but it's probably only a matter of time. It's encouraging that they're not just going to take their leftovers basically and dump it out on the table. It seems like they're actually going to put some care into picking and choosing why and what, which is basically like basic screenwriter stuff. But I feel like sometimes with sequels getting greenlit like this, you can fall into that trap of like, this is a cash grab kind of thing. And it sounds like just from their conversation in here that that hopefully won't be the case. Brad, did you have a chance to see A Quiet Place yet? I know that HT and I have seen it.
I have not seen it yet. I'm actually going to see it sometime this week.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to hearing what you think about that. Maybe you can come back on the show and let us know. All
Don't
right.
eat popcorn.
Yeah, all the crunching that would throw things off. So yesterday on the podcast, we talked about Westworld and how Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, who are the creators and showrunners of the show, essentially offered up a strange promise. They said that if enough people upvoted their post on Reddit, they would release a video that spoils the entire second season of the show in order to reveal the information to a select group of gatekeepers, and the hope would be for those people to then be able to sort of guide or control the flow of information across the internet, and in the hopes of like protecting people who didn't want to be fully spoiled for what's going on. So it was a strange idea, to say the least, and we talked a lot about that yesterday. Last night, they did reach their requirement of 1,000 upvotes, and they released a video on Reddit. And I guess I should say spoilers for Westworld season 2 coming up, but not really. I mean, like a little bit. But if you guys have, so I'll put it this way: when I went on Reddit last night and saw this video, a lot of people in that community had not watched it on purpose because they were not wanting to be spoiled, and therefore they didn't know what was in this video. And I'm going to tell you right now what is in this video. So if you don't want to know at all, then skip ahead 5 minutes or something like that in the podcast, and we'll go from there. So final warning. This video begins with it appears to be legitimate. Jeffrey Wright, who plays Bernard on the show, is narrating what seems to be some pretty real plot points. We see some footage that we've never seen before of his character waking up on a beach and meeting the head of Delos Security, and he slowly begins remembering what happens to him, and then all of a sudden he walks into the main western town. I think it's called Sweetwater in the show, and we see Angela Serafian, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, the actress who plays Clementine, and Evan Rachel Wood, who plays Dolores on the show, playing the piano and singing Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. So this whole thing was an elaborate Rickroll by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy on the entire fandom of Westworld. And yeah, the Reddit loves the song. So considering Nolan is like a really big Reddit guy, it makes sense that he would cater to their specific audience with that gag. But I'm curious what you guys think about this after our discussion yesterday. And what do you think about this whole thing, this elaborate head fake? HT, let's start with you since we talked about it yesterday.
Well, I feel fooled. Thanks a lot, Westworld. Even though I'm not even that quite invested in it, I was very intrigued by whatever this fake idea was at the beginning. You know, this idea of revealing spoilers, but it was just an elaborate troll, which, yes, they got us, and yes, we probably shouldn't have fallen for it, but, you know, well, it's whatever. It was on Reddit, and maybe only a select few actually did find out what it was, but man, that's I feel a little disappointed in myself, I guess I could say.
Brad, what do you think about all this?
I mean, it's kind of a fun thing that they did because it's a pretty elaborate prank. Like they shot a whole video, you know, with Evan Rachel Wood singing "Never Gonna Give You Up," and so I kind of like that they're messing with it a little bit. But at the same time, it would have been kind of an interesting experiment to see what would happen if you did do something like that. And plus, they kind of did like a long lead into it too, because they had like a conversation a couple weeks ago about, well, we have like a controversial plan as to how to approach fan theories, stuff like that coming up, and we'll be announcing that soon. And it's like, man, you guys you teased a joke that you were planning.
Yeah.
So
I
like,
wonder if they should have released it on April 1st instead of waiting a couple of weeks after.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, it would have been pretty perfect with that, and it would have made a lot more sense, I think, and maybe would not have angered people, because I saw a lot of people on Twitter last night when this happened get like actually sort of like upset at Nolan and Joy for doing this, because it seemed almost like mean-spirited in a way. Brad, do you think it's mean-spirited, or do you think they were just like having a good time and this is Reddit humor come to life?
it must be really nice to have that be the thing that you get mad about. I mean, there are stupid things happening around the entire country right now, and if this is the thing you're getting mad about, you must lead a pretty privileged life. Like, give me a break. It's an internet joke. It doesn't harm anybody or anything. Like, grow up, guys.
All right. Well, let's. Oh, actually, before we fully move on to that, Brad, it sounds like you would kind of be interested in seeing this kind of experiment actually come to pass. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would be interested to see what fan bases would do and how if it would make it easier to avoid spoilers, or if it would make it more difficult because you would have a lot more jerks who would know the information and intentionally try to spoil things. I don't know, because like I feel like it would be an interesting experiment to do, and it really only works if you do it with shows that do have a rabid fan base that are always trying to figure things out, or where spoilers actually matter. Like, you couldn't do it for, like the Goldberg,
right?
Because like no one cares about spoilers for that show. But I don't know. I don't even know what I would do if that were the case. Like, I feel like I would be so tempted to find out all the things, but I also love the idea of letting it unfurl on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting. I don't know.
HT, you would definitely watch the video, right? If it was real.
I don't know.
Really?
Actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, with all your talk about, with your entire mentality about spoilers, I assume that would be like a no hesitation response from you.
Well, I'm also not caught up with Westworld, so
Oh, right.
I probably would wait to see whether I am invested enough in the show to want to go see it. But yeah, I don't know. It hasn't come to pass, so I'm not sure what I would actually do.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right, so let's move on to our next topic, and that is a new book from J.R.R. Tolkien called The Fall of Gondolin is coming out this summer. Brad, tell us about this.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting a new Tolkien book that is being edited by Christopher Tolkien, so keeping it in the family. It is the final work of the author who brought us Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, and it will basically be the end of everything that Tolkien worked on before, and it's kind of, a coming full circle with all the things that he's created in Middle Earth. And it's definitely a very nerdy piece of writing, as anybody who has read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and whatnot can attest to. There's a lot of fantasy characters and details and things that, unless you've read the entire scope of J.R.R. Tolkien's books, you probably won't really know what's going on. I won't even read through the entire official synopsis, because if I did, you just wouldn't know half of it unless you know all the various characters. But needless to say, it involves plenty of elves and evil characters and magic and half elves and half humans and all this sort of thing. Action, adventure, excitement. What's kind of weird to me is that Gondolin kind of looks just like Gondor, and I don't know, it just seems like they kind of phoned in that the name for that place.
I mean, I think that probably happens. That happens a lot in Game of Thrones, and I know that George R.R. Martin was highly influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien, and Tolkien and Martin both were definitely influenced by like real things in history in terms of like family lineages and stuff like that. So it's a lot of like characters named Robert, and then a generation later another character named Robert, or somebody with a name that's like just one letter off from a previous name. So maybe it's sort of a nod to that, like the really old school method of naming things and nomenclature and all that. But yeah, I don't know.
That's fair. I think the biggest question that we have with this now is whether this is something that could be part of Amazon's upcoming plan to adapt Tolkien's work. We know that they're working on a big series adaptation of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, and whether that stories from this book or and any of the other books that Tolkien has written that have ties to this will be included remains to be seen. I'm not really sure how the rights work out, because I know some people have rights to do things with certain titles while others don't. Like that's the Silmarillion rights were never really accessible for a while. So it's hard to say where this new book falls into play, if like a separate deal would need to be crafted for it, or if it's definitely part of the Tolkien estate, but it's not really clear if the entire Tolkien estate is covered in Amazon's deal or anything like that. So who knows?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we know that the new Amazon show is going to be set before the events of the Fellowship of the Ring, but we don't know exactly how long before. And these events from this book, I think predate the Lord of the Rings trilogy by like probably thousands of years in the world, the realm of Middle Earth. So
it was also reportedly one of the first stories that he wrote. So it was kind of him sort of testing out the waters and forming the ideas that would eventually form the Lord of the Rings trilogy and series.
Interesting. Yeah. So the idea of like the Silmarillion, like the rights being sort of tied up, I think part of that was due to Christopher Tolkien himself. So he is actually 93 years old. He's the son of J.R.R. Tolkien, and he really hates all of the movie adaptations that Peter Jackson did. And he essentially stepped down as the head of the Tolkien estate because he's getting so old. And then right after that is when this Amazon deal happened. So it led us to believe at that point that maybe more Lord of the Rings properties and stuff like that, adaptations and things like that, could be in the works. But if this book is being edited by Christopher Tolkien, which it is, and all of J.R.R. Tolkien's posthumous novels have been, I wonder if the people involved at the Tolkien estate will sort of separate everything that he worked on in order to honor his legacy and his preferences. Because I feel like to have him step down and release this book and then immediately throw the rights to all of this stuff into the Amazon deal would be sort of a slap in the face to him. So I don't know. It remains to be seen, but HT, do you think that based on the super nerdy breakdown of what this plot is supposed to be, is this something you would be interested in seeing adapted for the small screen?
I'm not sure because it does seem like a very dense sort of tome and not even something that has a really cohesive narrative, I think. I get the feeling it'll be something more along the lines of just several sort of vignettes told in like maybe this one city, less so than like a strong story that we see in Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I'd want to see it adapted for a TV series. I think that Amazon already has their hands full with the Lord of the Rings series. So I don't know if they can really handle this one as well.
Right.
I am interested in picking it up to read, but yeah, I'm not really sure if it would really suit a TV adaptation just because it just seems so sprawling and dense.
Speaking of something that's sprawling and dense and possibly told over a series of vignettes, Isaac Asimov's Foundation is being made into an Apple TV series. David Goyer and Josh Friedman are behind this. HT, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so Apple has just landed the rights to a Foundation TV series that's going to be adapted by David S. Goyer and Josh Friedman. David S. Goyer is best known for being the screenwriter for Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, Dark Knight, whereas Josh Friedman is a writer for War of the Worlds, but he also penned the Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles. So they both have their feet in both TV and movies, but this will be a TV series for Apple, who has, which is a platform that's sort of steadily expanding its oeuvre of TV series, including that Reese Witherspoon drama, M. Night Shyamalan thriller, a La La Land, not La La Land, a Damien Chazelle drama as well. So there's a lot of, they're building up a lot of really interesting TV series, and this kind of adds to that catalog as well. So Foundation, for those who don't know, is a series of novels written by Isaac Asimov, who's one of the most influential sci-fi authors in history. And it tells the story of it's a saga rather, that follows humans scattered across the galaxy on different planets ruled by the Galactic Empire. So you can see shades of this story that in George Lucas's original Star Wars movies, for example, and it's been influenced everything from Lucas to George.R.R. Martin to real life public figures like Paul Krugman and Newt Gingrich. So it has wide influences. I haven't read Foundation series, but it's definitely a really influential sort of watershed sci-fi novels series of novels. So it's also one that's been kind of deemed unadaptable too, because several filmmakers throughout the decades have tried to their hand at adapting this, and a couple years ago, Jonathan Nolan tried to develop it for an HBO series, but that fell through.
Interesting. I have heard about Foundation for years, and I have never actually read it myself. Brad, are you going to be our saving grace here as the sole person on this podcast who has read Isaac Asimov's Foundation?
I have not read Isaac Asimov's Foundation. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
That's all you do for me, Brad. Is just disappoint me left and right. No, I'm not kidding.
Just like my parents.
Okay, yeah. So I think HT, you pretty much, since none of us have actually read it and can't really comment on the filmability of something like the adaptability of this, I think we'll probably leave this there. But it does sound like a very, very intense, sprawling saga that I am very interested to see if David S. Goyer and Josh Friedman can work something out here. Goyer's work over the past few years has dipped in quality for me personally, but I feel like Friedman is one of those guys who could surprise people. So I actually really liked Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles when that was on TV. So I'm interested to see how those two work together, especially on something as high profile and recognizable as this. Let's move on to our next story, and that is a Rogue One character that was hidden in the Solo: A Star Wars Story trailer. Brad, yesterday we had you on in the feature presentation to go over your trailer breakdown for Solo: A Star Wars Story. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is something that we missed, and I think a lot of people probably missed just because it's a minor character that appeared in Rogue One that has a little bit of a cameo in the most recent trailer for Solo: A Star Wars Story. And it's not necessarily anything groundbreaking, but it is kind of interesting because the character itself is a bounty hunter by the name of Tam Posla. I'm going to guess that's how it's pronounced, probably. This character is one of those kind of obscure side characters that just makes an appearance in the background of a movie. You know, there's plenty of different aliens and characters who all get expanded backstories in comic books and TV shows, video games, and all that jazz. And this was one of those characters. He's part of this group called the Milvain Authority, which are kind of like a group of interstellar law enforcement agents. But he's gone rogue, and he's become a bounty hunter, and he's gone well outside of his jurisdiction in pursuit of characters going by the names Rufu and Saki. What's kind of cool about that is those are actually aliases for Dr. Evanzan and Ponda Baba, who Star Wars fans will tell you are the two characters who hassle Luke Skywalker at the Mos Eisley Cantina in the original Star Wars. So this bounty hunter is after them. That's why he was on Jeddah in Rogue One, and he survived the attack on Jeddah, wasn't around when the Galactic Empire blasted the city with a lower-level Death Star blast. And so apparently it looks like some point before that, since as far as I know, I'm pretty sure the Solo movie takes place before the events of Rogue One, since Rogue One leads directly into A New Hope.
Right.
So maybe he's checking out shady locations because he's, still on the hunt for Ponda Baba and Dr. Evanzan before. Because as we all know, one of them has the death sentence on 12 systems. So they're probably doing some pretty freaky stuff all around the galaxy, and this guy is just chasing them around. It would be interesting to see if this character has anything more than just a quick background role. We see him standing behind Han Solo in a conversation he's having with Lando at the bar that we don't really know where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
So don't know if maybe he'll have some kind of entanglement with Han Solo. We know that Han frequently has issues with bounty hunters, so maybe there's something there, but I'm betting that it's probably just a cool little background inclusion that just keeps fleshing out the canon and uses characters and continues to expand those backstories.
So I think this is probably a good opportunity for them to drop this into a comic book or one of the novels or something, the spin-off novels that they're always working on. I have not really gotten into any of that. What's the word? That I want to say auxiliary, but that's not the right word. But
expanded?
Yeah,
ancillary.
Yeah, ancillary. There we go. Thank you, Brad. Brad, you didn't disappoint me. You're doing something right. There we go. The ancillary materials for any of the Star Wars stuff. But I know that Brad, like you watched Rebels. Have you gotten into any of the books or the comics or anything like that?
I have read the primary Star Wars comics. I also read some of the Darth Vader comics, but then I fell behind. This character, actually, Tam Posla, is apparently a secondary character in the Dr. Aphra comic book series, which I actually really don't know anything about. That's one that I've haven't ventured into or really read anything about, so I'm not really sure how prominent his role is there or even what that whole comic book arc is about. But yeah, I've read some of the stuff, and honestly, the comics are really good. The way it fleshes out the galaxy and utilizes characters and fills in gaps between the movies and things like that is pretty cool.
HT, have you read any of those? Any of the
haven't.
books or the comics or anything?
No, I'm not really into the Star Wars ancillary. Ancillary?
Yeah.
Yeah, ancillary universe.
Fair enough. Well, I'm sure that all of us can agree that we would love to see a Dave Bautista universe where he's just wandering around kicking ass and is the lead in a bunch of different movies, and it seems like that may be forming. Not that the next few projects that he's involved with are actually going to be connected in the same set in the same cinematic world, but Dave Bautista, the guy who starred in Guardians of the Galaxy as Drax, is going to be headlining a couple new movies. HG, tell us about those.
Yeah, so Dave Bautista is making his leap to leading man role. He's kind of gone a different route than his other former actor turned wrestler colleagues, such as John Cena and The Rock, and he's been sort of making his name in supporting roles, and got his breakout role in as Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. And since then, he's been kind of plugging away and making really great supporting turns in movies such as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2, and also Blade Runner 2049. So now he is stretching his comedy chops in 2 action comedies. The first one is 20th Century Fox's Stuber, which co-stars Kumail Nanjiani from The Big Sick and Iko Uwais. I'm sorry for mispronouncing his name, from The Raid 2. It's a mismatched detective buddy comedy with Kumail Nanjiani about a determined detective played by Bautista who commandeers an unsuspecting Uber and its driver, who's played by Nanjiani, and it results in a night of mayhem and hijinks. So it sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like it'll definitely stretch Bautista's comedy chops that we saw him first use in Guardians of the Galaxy. And then he's also starring in another one under STX Entertainment that's an untitled action comedy about a hardened CIA operative who finds himself at the mercy of a precocious 9-year-old girl. And that one is going to be written by John Eric Hober, who were behind the 2010 action comedy Red. So he's putting a lot of things on his plate, and it seems like he knows what his niche is, because he really did well as Drax and kind of was the standout role in that, as not really the comedic relief, but he did so well with that stoic sort of comedy balance.
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea of Bautista playing a hardened CIA operative who finds himself at the mercy of a 9-year-old girl has me rolling my eyes so hard. But the other project, Stuber, that one sounds really interesting and very much up my alley. Brad, are you, as our resident comedy expert, does this sound appealing to you? Do you think Dave Bautista has the acting chops, the comedy chops, to maybe be the next John Cena or something like that?
I definitely think there's potential there. He surprised me supremely with his role as Drax the Destroyer. He has pretty good timing. He's great at playing that character without overdoing it. So it's definitely something that I'm interested in seeing if he can pull it off. At the same time, I trust endlessly, in Kumail Nanjiani. So anything that if he's doing something with Kumail Nanjiani, then it can't be all that bad, because Kumail is at the top of his game right now, and he knows exactly what he's doing as far as great comedy is concerned. So, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, and I loved both of the Raid movies. So the idea of Iko Uwais coming in and being like potentially the big bad to bounce off of Dave Bautista in this movie is also very exciting to me. He's one of those guys that broke out with those Indonesian action films, but Hollywood can't seem to figure out exactly what to do with him. They've tossed him into small roles, and I think he was in Furious 7 and things like that, but he just hasn't really made the same impact that he did. Oh, he was in Force Awakens also for a split second.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, he just has not had an opportunity to really do anything memorable in a Hollywood studio system setting. So I hope that Stuber gives him that opportunity. Let's move on to our next option item, and that is NOS4A2, a TV series that's coming to AMC that is based on Joe Hill's horror novel. So this is pronounced like the classic vampire film, but it's actually spelled NOS4A and then the number 2, and it's spelled that way because this is the license plate number of a villain in this story. So the story in question is about a young woman named Victoria McQueen who has a secret gift for finding things. She rides her bike across this covered bridge, and when she's trying to look for something, and she just rides her bike across this bridge, and then it turns into a portal essentially that takes her to wherever she needs to be. And then the other character that she's sort of facing off with in the story is named Charles Manx, who is a child abductor who sounds like a real bad dude. He has this, he drives around in a 1938 Rolls-Royce Wraith with that NOS4A2 vanity plate, and apparently with his old car he can slip right out of the everyday world and onto the hidden roads that transport them to an astonishing and terrifying playground of amusements that he calls Christmas Land. He feeds off the souls of children and then deposits what remains of them into Christmas Land, which is a twisted Christmas harmless village of his imagination where every day is Christmas and unhappiness is against the law. So that sounds terrifying to me. I grew up watching Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and there was this child kidnapper in that
Oh my
movie
gosh.
that really like gave me nightmares as a little kid, and I'm sort of getting some shades of that from this description. HT, it sounds like you probably saw that movie as well.
Oh yeah, it traumatized me as a kid. The design of those child kidnappers looked so nightmarish. It was horrifying.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, in bringing it back to Nosferatu, this AMC has picked up 10 episodes of this series, and it's going to debut sometime in 2019. Brad, have you, by any chance, read this book or any of the others by Joe Hill, who's the son of Stephen King, by the way?
I think we've established that I'm pretty terrible at reading books. Uh, so, so no, I have not read any of the books in this series.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. Oh, the only other, I guess, relevant piece of information here is that Jamie O'Brien, who is involved with Fear the Walking Dead, is going to be the showrunner on this show, and it's coming out, like I said, in 2019. So you can read more about that at Slash Film, as with all of the things that we talked about. One more story before we wrap up today, and that is that HBO has fixed its pay gap between the genders thanks to one of its big stars. HT, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so HBO is starting to proactively try to close its own gender pay gap with the rise of Time's Up movement and the sort of greater focus on on pay disparity in Hollywood and in TV. So HBO executive Casey Boyles admitted that the phenomenal success of Big Little Lies, which is executive produced by Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman, has impacted other shows in sort of a way that they didn't expect. So he said in an interview with the Hollywood Reporter, one of the things that's come out of thinking about the Time's Up movement and some conversations with Reese Witherspoon, who's really at the forefront, is something we've done recently. We've practically gone through all of our shows. In fact, we just finished our process where I went through and made sure that there are no inappropriate disparities in pay. And where there were, if we found any, we corrected it going forward. So this was a direct result of the Time's Up movement. And it's something that I think they're trying to sort of preempt after Netflix was at the root of a scandal with The Crown and the pay disparity between The Crown star Claire Foy and her co-star Matt Smith. And we're starting to see this more both in TV and in Hollywood, though it seems like television is sort of leading the way for women.
Brad, what do you think about this?
I mean, it's only good news. Like with a big company like HBO taking the time to actually make sure that there's no gaps as far as wage discrepancies between men and women, like it's only a good thing for the rest of Hollywood to hopefully follow suit and realize that they need to stop paying women less than they're paying men. I mean, if anything, the payment should always be based on the work that you're putting in, and and that kind of thing. And it's the fact that there has always been consistently less dollars to go around for women as opposed to men doing the same job is ludicrous. So I think it can't be anything but good.
HT, I assume you're pleased with this?
Yeah, I'm really happy about it. I'm definitely excited that there are more female TV stars who are both in front of the camera and behind the camera and sort of realizing their worth and lobbying for paychecks that are on par with their male stars. We saw it with Grey's Anatomy star Ellen Pompeo, who's now the highest paid actress in primetime TV. And we also saw it with the new female Doctor Who, Jodie Whittaker, who made news for ensuring that she was paid just as much as Peter Capaldi before her. So I think that it's really exciting that more women are sort of emboldened by the Time's Up movement to try to get the pay that they deserve, or at least pay on equal footing with their male stars. And it's something that Hollywood is still working on, because we saw a couple months ago when Mark Wahlberg was paid way more than Michelle Williams was for the reshoots of All the Money in the World, although he ended up donating that money to a charity. I can't remember which exactly it was, but I think it's really good that dialogues and conversations are happening around this, and that at least the industry is starting to move forward in how they're treating this disparity.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all of what both of you just said. And I think, bringing up the Mark Wahlberg thing, it seems like he was sort of shamed into that because of the big outcry that happened around there. And it seems almost like HBO is like benefiting from Netflix's shame in a way by being proactive, and I applaud them for going through and doing this. They didn't have to do this. They could have waited until their own scandal broke before they reacted to this situation instead of actually going through and doing something about it. So this is one of those small steps, I think, that is one of those things that people can look back on as like a real measure of progress. And like yes, it's ridiculous that it took this long, but I'm glad that it's finally happening. So I think that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode of Slash Film Daily. Before we go, where can we find more of your work online? HT, let's start with you.
You can find me writing every day at slashfilm.com, and I'm on Twitter at Hoai-Tran Bui.
And Brad?
Always on the slashfilm.com. You can check me out on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton, and also on iTunes with my podcast called Go Flix Yourself.
Awesome. You can find me on slashfilm.com as well. You can track me down on Twitter at Ben Pearson. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features that you can find at slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to Slash Film Daily on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com, and make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Send us some emails, guys. We're looking for them. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word. We'll see y'all tomorrow.